Well, Alex, thanks so much for being on the show. It's really, really an honor to talk to you today.
Thank you, man.
I know you aren't supposed to do this in podcasts, but I'm going to start with a selfish question because I've always wanted to ask you this, and I would sincerely love your advice if you have any advice. I often look at food as this endless, endless void of information and culture and memories and science. Does it ever intimidate you how much there is to learn in food and do with food?
First of all, I think I agree with you. First of all, I think there's a vast amount of knowledge, an endless pit for every little detail in food. But I feel like it's not intimidating for me. Not that I am overconfident or anything. It's more like I've always been very curious. So whenever I know that there's a world behind a detail, I just feel more happy. I just feel happier inside. Whenever I'm dealing with that type of food, let's say, I don't know what I've been working like sauces, for example. Sauce could be as disappointing and deceiving as just, I mean, ketchup can be good, but still ketchup. And then you pull on that thread and you discover a whole world of possible condiment, more or less. I'm happy when I discover that. So I guess my curiosity, overtake my apprehension, my being scared of a new topic.
Do you find that that's like a more sustainable way to create? Because I have this dish of the day show that I had maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I want to bring that back. And I obviously have like the gear videos and this podcast, but it's so hard to decide for me on what to work on next. And with these series that you've been really diving into, I feel like it allows you to potentially be more present in your content because you're just focused on a certain type of dish or a certain type of cuisine. Does that help you when, like, in the chapter of you creating different types of content and being on the platform for a long time, like, does that help to have that focus more?
I think so. I've always found that having a frame helps being more creative. People think that you establish barriers, you establish limits, and all of a sudden you can't create no more. Usually it's pretty much the opposite. Barriers are just very helpful when it comes to thinking outside of the box. How can you think outside of the box if there's no box?
That's right.
So series help me focus a bit more and channel my creativity. There are ups and downs with series, I would say. I'm allowed to do series because I've been doing this for 10 years. And I've established something that kind of works, both from a creative but also from a financial point of view. So now I'm able to be shush for a few months and then come back with another series. I can do that, but in the past I couldn't do that. I just had to post, every week, and I was fine with it. But I guess as time goes by, I guess I'm more able to make my own decisions and to take responsibilities for them. So
When
yes and no. Sorry.
So, I mean, if you don't mind going into a little bit of, like, you mentioned that it makes it more sustainable for your creativity, but also financially. Does that mean that you just partner with a fewer number of sponsors, or you end up having additional content that you give to your community, and then I guess because there's a lot of chefs that are listening to this show right now who are like, I want to create content in addition to the food that I'm making, but yeah,
If I were to be a chef and I wanted to create some content on YouTube, I would not dive into a series
yeah,
because
because why?
it's more than a full-time job for me to create series. I
There's just no
could
time.
never ever do this as a side job. It's impossible. I mean, I do work the best I can, and I try to work as much as I can. But like writing this series, meeting the folks that I want to meet, and also just exploring different tracks, different possibilities, and failing quite often during these takes a heck load of time.
And energy.
So I'm thinking if I were to be a chef, I would just make content based on what I do in the restaurant. I would find a cheat, find a hack, something that differentiates me from the rest, and I would use that to create content on the fly. Use a GoPro or an iPhone. I would use an iPhone if I were to be a chef, because these guys, they must have no time for this.
Every time I get to that place where I get really overwhelmed with there's so much to possibly dive into and I don't know what to work on next, I almost go the other way sometimes, and I get really comforted with the fact that like we can go an entire career and never be done. That it will never be over. We will always have a job if this is what we're interested in, because there's always something new to learn and always more threads, a little bit to your point, to pull on. And so do you find comfort in that as well, or is it more intimidating than
Yes.
comforting?
No, I think it's comforting. I think I agree with you on that point. It's reassuring to know that there are so many threads surrounding us. You could be, as you just said, pulling on any of these, and maybe you could unlock, unveil a new pit of knowledge. Like I'm working on a new series at the moment, and the series is going to be based around pasta. So I won't go too specific on this, but I picked one tiny little details in the world of pasta. And at first I thought it's gonna be hard to turn it into a series. This is something that, deeply intricately interests me. But am I gonna be able to make it a series? Well, I turn it into a series for sure, and I've got way too many episodes already. So I'm thinking it's always a matter of, the lens through which you're looking at things. You could go macro, you could go wider, you could have like a normal point of view on it. I think it's reassuring that all these subjects could be turned into possible content. Not only series, by the way.
I think we agree on this as well, but correct me if I'm wrong. To me, proving myths wrong is incredibly satisfying in food. And I'm going to read a few that I grew up with as I was going to culinary school and in restaurants. Never trust a skinny chef. Some of the most talented chefs I worked with are super fit and like really, really good at movement and coordinating in the kitchen. So that was like, oh, that's wrong. And then I had another one where modernist cuisine came to my school and they did a whole presentation debunking the start your chicken stock in cold water myth. So in your life of creating content and learning about food, do you have any favorite myth bustings or learnings, whether it's technique or mindset wise, that you've really taken away from your work in food? Favorites of yours?
I tend not to follow either traditions or cliches if I haven't tried them myself. I would be lying if I were not to say that one of my biggest source of reliable information is Serious Eats. Serious Eats plus modernist cuisine plus maybe what's it called, an engineer's cookbook. I don't know. These guys, they've been just consistently trying and experimenting like the scientific way, and I like this very unbiased approach. They say it should be done this way. Well, I've been trying all the possible ways, and turns out you don't have to. So I can't think of something super explicit right now, but if I do, I'll just bring it up.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, maybe another way to phrase it is that you thought there was one way to do it, but then you saw somebody else do it, and you're like, well, no, duh. There's, I mean, for one of my examples is I went to when I was working in Norway for a little while, and my sous chef at the time he had worked at Le Serre in Paris, and he saw me making a hollandaise sauce for the menu in a double boiler, and we had induction burners at the restaurant, and he came over and he was like, "Why are you doing a double boiler? You can just put everything into a pot and put it on the stove and just make it in the pot because we had these special shaped induction pots, and it was just he was like, you save yourself the dishes and it's less steps and all that stuff." The same. Another one is Christina Tosi has in the Milk Bar book that if you're making a like an anglaise or a custard sauce, you don't have to temper everything. You can just put everything into the pot and just do it together. And it was like, oh, well, no, duh. And it's like part laziness and part like technique. Like you want the technique is good, but like why add extra steps if you don't have to? And so those are some of my favorites.
I would never qualify this as laziness. It only appears to me as cleverness.
That's
Just
right.
being clever. Just why would you add like the fact that you mentioned hollandaise is an easy for me because I've been working on hollandaise in the sauce
Correct.
series, and yeah, the basic, but that's definitely not coming from me, but that's something I've adopted immediately when I saw it, like how to make hollandaise in a blender. Just that's it. You just, if I remember correctly, you just start with the egg first, and then you pour in boiling hot butter on it. Just works every time. And I mean, to my appreciation, it's even better than the one I make in a double boiler because I feel like it's lighter. Maybe introducing a bit of air inside of it makes it, more flavorful. Obviously, that's subjective, but still, more air means more flavor usually. So this is something that there's no going back once you do that. Why would I make my life, harder than what it is already?
Because it truly shows that you understand the technique at that point. Because it's not the fact that the clarified butter and the egg yolks are sitting on top of two sets of pans that makes a hollandaise, right? It's like the
Hmm.
temperature control and the amount of fat that you're adding and the like aggressiveness at which you're
Yeah.
incorporating the emulsion. It's like all of that is actually what's important. And so if you can do that in a blender, like that shows you actually understand the technique. I think that's
You know,
interesting.
these guys. I got two examples coming up. Say,
Mm.
oh, it's starting to bubble. So the guy from Modernist Cuisine, I had the chance to have Nathan Mirford in my studio. He came to
Wow.
my studio at some
When was
point.
this? When was this?
It was like I think it's in the Sauce series. I think it's in the episode where I mentioned that not the thickening agent. I can't remember the name of that stuff. It's not agar. It's another one.
Xanthan gum.
Xanthan gum,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
That's because in a sauce episode I was trying to thicken a sauce and I did try a few thickeners and I thought I could try xanthan gum just to see how it would work. It's not bad. It has challenges to it, but I mean used very reasonably, it's not bad. And the guy was in, and I took the opportunity. He was in Paris, and I jumped on the opportunity to meet the guy, and he gave me a few advices on how to use xanthan gum and how it works on a molecular level, as you would expect from the guy who just wrote Modernist Cuisine. But then we had a long chat about emulsions, and one of the dish that I mean, that's where he brought up that he tends to decant the wine using a blender.
Right.
And I was like, because he told me, you're just trying to incorporate more air. And I was like, yes. He said, why don't you blend it? You're going to incorporate tons of air. And I was like, because I can't do that. Because that would be blasphemy for me to do this. He said, well, I don't think you would see that as blasphemy. And I say, yeah, you're right. I think I'm going to blend my next wine. And I did. It does work. I still can't do this for friends and families because they click. They don't appreciate that. They don't like it. So I mean, food. That's where I think I would definitely differ from these guys who are so knowledgeable when it comes to food and chemistry and molecular. But there's always a cultural aspect to it. So I know this is the correct method, but I don't want to offend anybody. So I'm just cool for myself. I would do it 100%. Comes to my mind another example of something I've been doing differently, and that was during a cacio e pepe episode. So cacio e pepe, that Roman dish that you know very well. So just cheese, pepper, and pasta. You turn that into an amazing, silky, cheesy, creamy dish where the cheese is nicely incorporated. Nothing goes into lumps. Nothing goes stringy. It's just like a creamy dish made possible by the pasta water, the starch in pasta water, more or less. And so I had a chat with Italian folks, and they told me in Italian restaurant they would use cornstarch to make it more stable.
Really?
And I thought, how can you do that? I thought it would be just like absolutely forbidden. And they told me, well, it just makes our life easier. Also, nobody can taste it. It's just a fraction. So just make the whole emulsion more stable, makes your life easier. I'm no restaurant chef, so I don't need to put out consistent meals, consistent dishes every day, all day, lunch, dinner, but they have to. And they told me, well, it helps with consistency a lot, and it's not affecting flavor. And also, I guess the fact that they're being Italian helps, legitimate that trick. So I think it was fun. It was just like eye-opening for me. I'm thinking, Italian do it. Who am I to say no to that cheat?
And if I don't know, you're right because xanthan gum can make things taste like snot or feel like snot. Like
Yes,
it's really like unpleasant when you overdo it. But there's a bunch of tricks. Like, have you used Ultratex before? Ultratex is like a chef's favorite. Like if you're making like a beet puree or a carrot puree, you add a little bit of Ultratex to it, and it's going to be shiny and really really smooth and have
Mm.
a little bit more volume if you're blending it in a blender. And I don't know. Like I think that there was this thing where people started to look at the back of the ingredient box and anything that they couldn't pronounce or they didn't grow up eating, they're like, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad." But like, agar agar is made from seaweed. Like it's not going to kill you.
And like salt. I wouldn't know how to pronounce this in English, but in French, it's chlorure de
Yeah,
sodium,
sodium chloride. Yep.
sodium chloride. So if you say sodium chloride to somebody, they would freak out. It's fucking salt. One thing that was funny in the cacio e pepe, I'm bringing that up because I think it also showcases sometimes how I tackle, new subject. I was so the whole content is parted in 2 episodes. First one, I'm trying to replicate Italian tradition in making cacio e pepe. A second one, I'm just drifting away from the tradition and finding an easier way for me to do it. And within the first one, or was it within the second one? Anyways, at some point, you make the cream, you cook the pasta, blah, 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 and you have to use pepper because the dish is basically cacio e pepe, so cheese and pepper. And the thing that struck me making that episode, writing that episode, was like all the Italian cookbooks I've read, they just say use freshly cracked pepper. And I was thinking of all my Indian friends. They would not do that. They would first always toast the spices
Right.
because you want to wake up those spices. And I thought this is an easy fix. This is nothing for me. I'm bringing nothing. Indian chefs are bringing that because they all know how to handle spice. So I called a friend, and she told me, of course you should always toast pepper if you can. It's gonna taste so much better. And she also pointed out that what pepper are you referring to? Is it like South Indian Malabar, or is it any other one? Is it one from Vietnam? And I was like, of course. Then I should try and pair the right pepper with pecorino then. And the fun fact is that Italian chefs actually reviewed my videos on YouTube. And they were watching me, playing with their traditions, playing with their cacio e pepe. And they were mostly okay with what I did. They were pretty nice with me. And then when they saw the pepper, they were like, huh, of course. Comes from Indian. Yeah, I mean, it's a classic trick from any cook you would meet in India. Makes sense. And I was like, I knew it.
Got him.
Got it. I did a few mistakes on the side, which did compensate for that.
I think that there's something there where you almost want to get to the point where there's respect, or there's like it's like that makes sense moment. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then there's no rude comments that say, oh, this isn't the traditional way, or this isn't, because it's like, oh, well, this actually does level it up a little bit, or makes it more pure is the wrong word, but it's like you get more to the essence of it, or you can elevate it a little bit. Yeah, maybe authentic. Yeah, it's difficult to parse that.